238, and the meeting ID number is 173-900-2238. Or you can send your public comments to publiccomments@psta.net. So Julie, do we have anyone that wants to make a public comment at this time?
There is nobody on the line that's called in. I can verify that there have been no additional written comments. Clarissa, can you let us know if there are any written comments?
There are no public written comments.
Thank you.
All right.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. And number 3, action items. We have one action item to approve the minutes of October 5th, 2020. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Counselor. And may I have a second?
Second, from Driscoll.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. I think that was Commissioner Heather Gracie that made the second, right?
Driscoll.
I think
Yes.
we both did. Surely give it
Oh,
to Gina. It's fine.
All right, then. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay or aye.
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 Okay, then we have a unanimous vote. Number 4, information items. Ron, do you want to talk about the state legislative plan, please?
yeah, and Ron, I will show you. So before Ron speaks, let me just highlight where we're at in the process. So this is our sort of our final time we're planning on any discussion on the agenda we're putting together. We've made a number of modifications over the last couple weeks, and then next month in October we will take this to the PSTA, the full board, for adoption. Put it together, and this will basically be the framework for our 2021 legislative session. I'm sure Ron and Alan might be able to chime in on things they've heard about the session coming up, but let me show you what we've got here. And you have this in your packet as well. There. Can you all see that?
$1,000 grant opportunity through DOT, and then the Clearwater Ferry Partnership. I think that's going to lead to an opportunity also for a grant, a developmental grant opportunity, which would be over a 3-year period, as you all know, where Clearwater Ferry would be the lead on it, but we would be working with them potentially on trying to get, support them in getting those dollars again. I think both of those would be grant opportunities. Number 6, new state funding for T-BARTA. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the meeting, but the one thing I want to highlight there is it's going to be really key for T-BARTA this year to get either recurring funding or some type of funding that's not going to impact its transit partners. I know Cassandra's going to talk about that here in a bit, but whatever that funding that stream looks like is make sure that it does not impact other transit projects coming out of the Tampa Bay area. One idea that we've kicked around, we've talked with DOT about is potentially having, instead of the funding going through DOT, having the funding come directly to T-BARTA. They are an entity created by the Florida legislature, so they could get their own line item. So we're going to begin to have conversations with incoming House and Senate leadership about that. And then the last thing I'll touch on is, it's kind of under existing funding here, but talking to DOT over the last couple of weeks, they're going to probably have upwards of a $750 million hole in their work plan for next year. And so making sure that whatever impacts they have within the work plan process, we try to minimize those on transit. The good news is, I think DOT is kind of beginning to move towards coming up with additional pots of money that could be spent on transit. I'm not sure how the 2020-2021 budget will impact that. Again, talking to David Gwynn yesterday, and I know Commissioner Lons talked to him as well. They're facing, as a state right now, about a $750 million shortfall specifically for the work plan for next year. And that's also for out years as well. So if it's going to have a shortfall next year, you're probably looking as with the gas tax collections continuing to go down, coupled with COVID, it's just not good, obviously, for the DOT work plan. So I'll pause there. Everything else that's on there, 1 through 8, we've talked about. And I think as Brad talked about, our goal is to have the full board approve this in October. And then we would start working members of our delegation and going into, because remember, let me remind everybody, session starts back in March and April. So committee weeks will start again in January. We just want to make sure that we're in a position to have these teed up and ready to go with our delegation members prior to January. So I'll stop there and be glad to answer any questions from committee members.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Ron, can you send me any updated documentation on number 4, the Clearwater Ferry partnership, how that's stacking up? That's going to impact City of Bel Air Bluffs as well, so I want to kind of keep tabs on that. Thank you.
We'll absolutely do that. And as they're getting further along in the grant process, I know there's another grant I think Cassandra has applied for that's impacting Clearwater as well. I don't think it impacts a specific project, but we'll make sure that you're in the loop, anything that's impacting the Clearwater Ferry Partnership. Absolutely.
Yeah, Chair Barkley, we'll go ahead and send you the plans. We're working with carefully both at the federal and the state level on seeing what grant opportunities might be out there to make that really into a transit service that perhaps would expand down to Bel Air Bluffs as well. So yeah, we want to keep you definitely in the loop on that. Forward Pinellas is creating their waterborne transportation committee, and they've got a meeting now, first meeting I think of that waterborne transportation group that they put together for early October. So yeah, definitely keeping the loop on the ferry.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anyone else have any questions of Ron? So I have one question, Ron. When you talked about the deficit with T-BARTA, was that taking into consideration the cuts that they are proposing to make between now and then?
Madam Chair, the cuts were I'm just talking about just the state, not T-BARTA. The state of Florida on DOT overall DOT work plan is facing a deficit for next year.
Are there any movements to schedule that meeting with Secretary Gwynn?
So we had a meeting yesterday, and I'll talk with you offline about that based upon the conversation. So we did talk to Secretary Gwynn yesterday, but based upon that, we may actually put a couple of meetings in between that meeting and the meeting with Secretary Thibeault. I think we want to talk to Senate President Designee Simpson first about some ideas that came out of that meeting. So we had a good conversation yesterday with Gwen, and I think we're going to try to have 1 or 2 meetings before we go to speak with Secretary Thibeault.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Ron and Chair Long, if I could just ask Ron a question. So as we put this together, and the PSA board approves it, do you have any recommended key targets of legislators from either the Pinellas or the Tampa Bay region that you think we should sort of float this by before, this fall, recognizing pandemic and the election might be tough to get meetings with them, or before the session starts, key legislators that might be important to our initiatives?
Sure, and I'll let Alan chime in here as well. I mean, I think number one, we should obviously meet with all the members of our delegation, with Chris Sprowls being a part of that delegation, number one, as the incoming speaker. Also meet with Wilson Simpson, and then, we don't know who the TED chairs are going to be yet. We can, Al and I can guess who that's going to be, but once the TED chairs are announced, the TED Appropriations chairs for the House and Senate, I think we should meet with them as well. So, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I agree. We've had some conversations certainly with the incoming speaker about PSTA in general. I wouldn't say we've gotten to any specific projects, but I think somebody's at my door. I apologize if you hear the dogs in the background. But anyway, so we've talked with Chris. We've talked with others. I think there are some rumors out there about who the TED chairs are going to be. I don't know that it will be anybody from our region. I think it's more likely to be, especially in the House, probably a member of the Panhandle delegation. Jay Trumbull from Panama City is certainly going to be the House Approach Chair. So we know some of the chess pieces. We've had some very preliminary conversations just about some of these more formulaic, FDOT main office needs that we kind of know are going to be there, but not necessarily specific things drilling down. So we'll certainly get to that. But I can tell you that on the budget deficit that Ron talked about, I had a meeting last week with the governor's budget director, and we talked pretty extensively about not just DOT, though certainly that was a focus, but state government in general. And they feel I think everybody probably read the story that this was the first month that sales receipts kind of matched estimates, which was good news, but still not great news with the hit that we've been taking. But they feel pretty comfortable that we're going to continue to inch our way out of this, which is helpful. Add on to that, they've been in it's not something that we're working on. Obviously, it's Harry and his folks are paying certainly more attention to this, but they've gotten some pretty good signals from DC that there are going to be some level of either additional funding or flexibility in previous funding to the state government that will allow them over probably that 3 to 5 year period that Ron mentioned, that there's going to be these deficits in the Transportation Trust Fund and in others, Medicaid and all the other things we know that have taken a hit, that there will be some fairly significant funding, they hope, coming down the pipe from DC to help fill those holes. And the governor's committed, at least internally, per the budget director, he's committed that transportation is going to be a major focus of those dollars as long as they're allowed to do it, because of number one, the infrastructure needs that we have. He knows those are important, but also the jobs that can come with some of these infrastructure projects. So I think they're planning in advance. They're looking at it. They understand the gaps that are there. They're looking at the numbers every day. But I think that they're putting together something that's going to focus on the needs that PSTA as an organization has. Organizations like ours all over the state. So that was some pretty good news we got last week. That at least that's high on their radar.
Well, thank you guys for that. I would say probably two things that are on our list that are very Tallahassee administration focused that are on our priority list, and maybe we could track getting meetings with the staff over at the DEP to get an update on the electric buses, on the VW settlement funding before session really gets going, and then also on the Medicaid transportation stuff, get that going again. I don't know, Alan, if we could reach out to the contact you have there and see if we could get that going again.
Yeah, so I talked to Eunice about 2 weeks ago. She's the that's who we met with. And so I talked to her. The chief of staff, Toby, has left. He's gone on to another position. They're looking to fill Toby's role. But in the interim, Toby reconnected me with Eunice and said, hey, this is still important to the secretary. Please, keep talking to Alan about it. And she said, basically, I think what we would all expect. She's like, listen, we're pretty swamped right now, just in trying to keep our head above water. But this is absolutely still a priority, and you all are absolutely at the very top of the list when we start reinstituting our plan for those roundtables and discussions, Brad, that we talked about when you were in Tallahassee, and making sure you were you had a leadership role in those. She said that is absolutely still the plan. As soon as they can refocus on it when the current pandemic has subsided to a level where they can do so. It's just they're treading water right now. But yes, I talked to her in the last 2 weeks, so I think we're still on target there.
Thank you. Okay.
Is that it?
That's
it, Ron? All right. Thank you very much. Then how about this TMA earmark policy draft, Cassandra?
Good morning, Chair Long, members of the committee. I wanted to bring to your attention a conversation that's happening at the TMA leadership group starting this month. We've been talking lately in this committee about earmarks and unintended consequences of earmarks, as well as our state block grant funding reallocation proposals. And all of these approaches that we have for transit agencies to get money from the state have unintended consequences. And we've talked about those unintended consequences. But the real issue is that there is a scarcity of dollars at the state for transit. And in looking at this from a policy perspective, the TMA staff directors have started a conversation about changing the way that we approach asking for the state for funding. And in their original proposal that they brought to some of the transit agency staff was to eliminate or ban earmarks. And so we had a long conversation with them about that approach and how that may not be the most efficient way for us to get more dollars to transit, and again, may have unintended consequences. PSTA itself has not asked for an earmark since 2017, but others have, and it has caused some reallocation, and I think some, to put it quite bluntly, some hurt feelings about how dollars within the transit authorities have become more scarce, and we're fighting off each other as opposed to fighting for more dollars. So this is really a policy issue, or at least could be, for this legislative session. As Ron mentioned, the budget is going to be very tight, and we're not using our current dollars as efficiently as we could. We find that there are two issues that we could discuss in the context of the TMA policy direction. And one is funding available for highway capacity. This specifically is a program called the Other Arterials program that is allocated by the MPO, but because it's focused on highway capacity and not just people capacity, it poses a problem in the flexibility of the uses of these funds. So just so you know, there was $400 million that was sent back to central office by Pinellas County because we couldn't find state roadways that needed additional capacity. Now, of course, we could put all of that additional capacity back into the transit system if we had the flexibility with that program for urbanized areas to make that call about how to flex those dollars. The other issue at the state is this idea of the work program, which I think is very well organized. FDOT does an excellent job of making sure that they take maintenance off the top, that they do safety projects. But when it comes to setting other priorities, it's very difficult for us to necessarily look out 5 years. If you looked 5 years back, PSTA would be a very different organization than we are today. And what has made us a different organization is our ability to be quick, to be nimble, to put out new projects and create this innovation that sometimes is 6, 12, or 18 months out as opposed to 5 years. So this is a discussion that will come to the TMA in September. They will be discussing, and I know, Chair Long, you are on the TMA as the PSTA representative, so you'll get a copy of the draft that goes to the TMA, but I would recommend that we make sure that Rachel sends the draft to all of you on this committee as well. PSTA staff is making 2 recommendations to the TMA, the MPO directors who are discussing this issue. One is to give flexibility on how priorities are funded. So give the MPOs in urban areas more flexibility in how these programs that we already have can be used. And I think to Ron's credit, his discussion with Secretary Gwynn has validated this, that Secretary Gwynn at the local level, while he is a great advocate for us, by policy, he has very little flexibility to give us discretionary dollars. And so by looking at people capacity as opposed to just highway capacity, I think this flexibility would allow Pinellas County to use our dollars in the way that we see fit. The other is looking at new modern transit programs. So this is revamping the Florida Department of Transportation transit programs to fit today's speed of transportation technology. So looking at boxed funds that allow for same-year innovation programs to get funding, and as well as maybe some programmatic set-asides for innovation. This would make an earmark process, if you will, at the state level within the context of the Florida Department of Transportation Work Program, but make it more like what we are used to at the federal level. And so those are the two recommendations that staff has made so far to the TMA executive directors. And we know that this is a good time to have this conversation, one, because the budgets are tight and we're going to look for ways to make them more flexible, and it's a good year for a policy discussion. Two, a lot of the large MPOs around the state are in the same situation, and so they're also pushing for these changes. And FDOT staff internally is looking at how to create new modern programs, and they're looking for our comments and our suggestions on how we can make this a state priority within their programs. We do have a good relationship with FDOT, probably the best that I've ever seen in my more than 20 years in this region. But it's a really good time to memorialize that good relationship and not necessarily live with bad policies while we trust each other at this time, because things can always change, and having those good policies in place is really important. This is just a discussion item and really more of an information, a heads up for you all. The TMA will be discussing it at their mid-September meeting. I think it's September 18th. They intend to come back to us in October and make a more formal presentation on the proposal for how we handle this as a region. And they have a couple of other things they want to talk about in terms of regional communication and talking to each other about what other discretionary grants we're going after at the federal level. But they wouldn't vote on this until November. And so I'll open the floor for questions, but understand that this is a moving target, and you will see it again in October.
Any
That's all I have,
questions
Ms.
from
Mayor.
anyone? No? All right, well then, let's move on to the federal agenda with Harry Glenn. And is Steve on the call, Harry? I don't know.
I think Steve will be back. He like Alan, had somebody at his door. A repairman was coming to the door, so I think he went to
Oh,
rescue
I
the
wasn't
repairman.
quite sure who that was when they said that.
Yeah.
All right, so do you want to present your report?
Yeah, and Harry, I'll go ahead and show it here. But right, so again, sort of on the same timeline as the state agenda, we've been working on this federal agenda, making great strides in it. Already knocked some things off here. Let's see. I think you can see this now. We're going to keep the Sunrunner project on here until this we have this great project completed. Harry and Steve probably can give us the latest breaking news in Washington about COVID-19 support. And then same thing as the state agenda, we're focused on electric bus programs and the Clearwater Transit Center and Clearwater Ferry projects. So Harry, I'll pass it on to you to kind of fill in the latest on these.
Sure. Thanks, Brad. Good morning, everybody. I guess I'll do a combined federal update and look at our federal agenda. As Brad said, we want to keep the Sunrunner project. I don't know that we have any issues right now, Brad. I think you all are doing a great job working with the FTA in Washington and the regional office, and that seems to be moving along fine. The second item on here is COVID support. I mean, just to give you an update, somewhat good news yesterday is Secretary Mnuchin, who's been one of the principal White House negotiators on this next COVID package, actually phoned or called Speaker Pelosi, so they actually had a short phone call yesterday, which was a good sign. That's the first time I think they've talked in about 4 weeks. So it's a good sign that Senate comes back into session next week. The House comes back in the week after that. So the Senate, you're going to read some news this week and early next week that the Senate's going to vote on a COVID package next week when they're back. It's going to be about a $500 million package, which is far short of what the original Senate package was and originally what the $3.4 trillion package that the House passed. So it's more of a message sender to give senators a chance to vote on something. But I don't expect that's going to be the final package. They're probably going to wind up in the $1 trillion, somewhere between $1 trillion and $2 trillion. And I think the higher that number goes, the better it is for transit, because a slimmed down package doesn't leave much room for additional transit support. And there have been lots of stories this month about the large transit agencies around the country are really struggling. New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and others, and in Washington, D.C., they all need help. And so I think there's a message out there that they're going to go underwater unless they get some more help in this next COVID package. So we'll continue to monitor that and let you know. Brad, I think you finally gotten your payment, I think, from FTA from the CARES Act. Is that correct?
That's right.
So hopefully there'll be some more shows up for you maybe later in the year. What we're expecting, just to continue on with the update and the COVID, what's probably going to happen, Congress only has about 15 legislative days before the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. So it would appear that whatever Congress is going to do is going to be on one large package that would probably include a continuing resolution to keep the federal government running past September 30th. They need to do that. They're talking about having some kind of a continuing resolution through probably December 18th to get them past the election and give them time to negotiate everything they need to negotiate in November. The House has passed 10 of their 12 appropriations bills this year. The Senate hasn't approved any yet, and their committee hasn't even approved any yet, so they got a long way to go. So we need to do that to keep the government running. The COVID package will probably be forward into that, whatever they agree to there, as well as more money for disaster assistance around the country. You know, we had the Hurricane Laura, we had the wildfires in California, the derecho in the Midwest, and whatever other storms pop up here in the next couple of weeks. So that'll probably all be combined into one large package, and we'll move that along. The other thing of interest in that package will probably be a one-year extension of the FAST Act, which are the federal highway and transit programs. As you know, they need to be reauthorized before the end of September. The House has passed a bill, the Senate hasn't yet, and so it's likely they're just going to have to extend that for another year to give Congress time to figure out what they want to do and how to pay for it. And unlike Alan and Ron's situation, it's very unclear what the next federal government will look like in the new year, whether who's going to be the president, who will be running the Congress. All those things have yet to be determined, and the November 3rd elections will determine that, and that will then determine what's the federal agenda for the next Congress. So, you know, some of these things on our list are probably not dependent upon that, but we don't know. The rest of the federal agenda, Brad, electric buses, the House Highway Bill provided some significant additional funding for electric buses, and the hope would be when they get around next year to negotiating a new highway and transit bill that emphasis on electric buses will continue so that there's additional resources for you all to compete for. You've done a great job, your staff, over the last couple of years competing and winning federal grants for electric buses, and the goal would be to get more of those grants and larger dollar figures so you can buy more buses. The Clearwater Transit Center, we've been talking to Brad and Cassandra about that project. Congress may very well do an infrastructure bill early next year to stimulate the economy and do highway and transportation projects could be a part of that. And that might include an opportunity to expand funding for what's called the Federal Build Grant Program, which are larger transportation investments. Might be a good opportunity for PSTA, the City of Clearwater, the county to all work together on a build grant application for the Clearwater Transit Center. There are some other federal programs that might qualify for, so we'll look forward to working with Brad and Cassandra on that. The Clearwater Ferry Partnership, I know Commissioner Barkley mentioned that. We had a really good call, Brad, Cassandra, and Steve and I, with the FTA on Monday to talk about the federal ferry boat program. They as we mentioned on previous calls, there's a federal FTA runs a program that provides funding for infrastructure related to ferry operations, boats, repair of boats, ferry dock structures, those kinds of things. They do not support operating expenses, but they will support capital projects to support ferry boat projects. Last year, there were 12 projects funded around the country, one in Jacksonville. So there's a good opportunity there for PSTA to take the lead on that. And Cassandra did a really good job with FTA trying to clarify, explain the project you're looking at and see if it would be eligible for FTA funding. So that was a good start. And then the last item here is, as we mentioned, the FAST Act has to be reauthorized. Since it won't be done this year, it'll be carried over for 1 year. We'll have to look at some of these issues related to the formulas to count some of your transit on demand trips to make sure they get counted in your formula. Currently not. There was funding provided in the House FAST Act approved by the House this summer. It would provide additional federal funding to increase frequency of bus routes, key bus routes. That would be helpful to you all. Support, again, more money for electric buses and charging equipment. And then there is a negative provision in the House passed bill that would penalize transit agencies like yours that use transit on demand to supplement your services. And so we need to continue to work on that. And this will depend in large part, frankly, on the elections. There's, the Senate could switch leadership to the Democrat side. That we'll keep an eye on that, because right now the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, which oversees transit programs, is from Idaho. So he doesn't have a real strong interest in transit. It's not a high priority for him. But the Democrat who would take over as chairman if the Democrats take over the Senate is Sherrod Brown from Ohio. And they clearly have a great interest in transit programs with some large cities, Midwest cities in Ohio. And so there would probably be more of a focus on transit in the Senate under new leadership next year. And Brad has developed a really good relationship with the Senate Banking Committee staff that would still be on staff regardless of who takes over. So I think there's a good opportunity there to work on some of these issues. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Harry, for that very comprehensive report. Anyone have any questions about anything? I can't see you now because Brad has the presentation up there.
Oh, okay. I will stop this.
Yeah, there you go. Anybody have any questions from Harry? No?
Commissioner
Brad?
Long,
Yeah.
I'll just quickly mention, if you saw our agenda, it has a sort of Clearwater flair to it. And so I now have a monthly call with the city manager of Clearwater, Bill Horn, to talk about all the different initiatives. And of course, I'm keeping our board member from Clearwater, David Albritton. He's very supportive of all these things. He's really going to be pushing his own city and PSTA to support this build grant application this coming year to get funding to build a new transit center in Clearwater. And that will take a lot of coordination with the chambers, with the county, to get everyone supportive of, that we get enough local support so that we can have a really good competitive grant application. But yeah, thanks to Harry for setting up that meeting he mentioned with the feds on the ferry program. We have some decisions to make on that, because we really think there is a great potential for ferry federal money for the ferry boat. But when you get federal money, you bring all of the environmental requirements of the feds with it. And the city of Clearwater has a whole bunch of marina improvement projects and plans. And I don't know if the federal rules and regulations, we don't want to hurt Winter the Dolphin, of course, but whether or not those will harm or help remains to be seen. So stay tuned more on that.
So Brad, if I could ask you, when you talk about the Clearwater Transit Center, can you identify for all of us who may have forgotten exactly where in Clearwater you're proposing that be?
Yes, so with the new mayor and new city council on the Clearwater City Council just back in March, they've now had a couple of informational sessions where it appears their number one priority for a new Clearwater City Hall is where the PSTA Transit Center is now, right in downtown Clearwater, that they would build a parking garage and new city hall, they would like to, on top of where the PSTA Transit Center is currently and has been for 35 years and is in desperate need of either repair or replacement. The idea that's been floated for a long time now is that we would give the city our property and they would give us their property, which is the old Tampa Bay Times site you might be familiar with at Court and Myrtle, just a couple of blocks east of where we are now. That would be the spot for the new transit center. The city hall would be where we are now. So it'd be kind of a land swap kind of deal.
Okay, and then how is the city supportive of all of what we're trying to do to help the ferry?
I think they are, yes. I mean, Cassandra is sort of the lead on that. And, like I said, the devil is in the details as far as when we bring the federal money to the projects that Clearwater has planned for marina improvements and such. Does that hurt their initiatives because we bring in new environmental requirements with the federal money? So that's I think the next step is to navigating exactly what we want to expose to those requirements, but what we want the federal grant to be for. And our goal is to have a plan to present to the MPO's waterborne transportation group on October 9th. So in the next month, we will have a plan put together.
Excellent. Any questions from anyone?
Madam Chair, this is Ron. Based upon the conversation with Brad, and I know that Cassandra and her team's been working on it as well, we may want to add the Clearwater Intermodal Center project to our legislative agenda. I think we would clearly fit in there between three and four is add another, and it's a grant opportunity. It's $2.3 million that's being applied for a grant from DOT. We're actually working with Cassandra right now and trying to get some letters of support from our delegation, but I think that would be a good addition that we put on there. Just so we don't lose sight of it, and we can provide updates as needed.
That's a good idea. Thank you, Ron.
Anybody opposed to that idea? No? All right, well, moving right along. Do we have other business to discuss?
Nothing.
Wow, we're all very mellow today. I don't know what that's all about. It's usually much more of a robust conversation. No other further business, Brad?
Nothing else for today, Madam Chair.
Well, I'm sure we'll think of something between now and the next time we meet, right, Ron and Harry?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure something will come up.
Okay, so then just rest up for the next few weeks till we meet again. With that said, we are adjourned. Thank you very much,
Thank you all.
everyone, for
Thanks,
your
everybody.
time.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Good meeting. Bye.